Hello, beautifuls. I'm so excited for another episode of About Her, and today I have the wonderful Ellen with me. Ellen, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have you, and we have just chatted so much that I thought we need to hit record before some of this beautiful information gets lost. But before we dive back in, I would love to have you introduce yourself or how much you're comfortable with so that people can kind of get a bit of a feeling for you.
Okay. I'm Ellen Davidson. I'm 70. I live in the redwoods of far northern California. And about 31 years ago, moved into this house with an old growth redwood tree in the backyard that began visiting me and teaching me in my dreams. And at the time, I was really into dreams and writing them all down in journals, but it didn't occur to me that a tree could be conscious or could work with me in my dreams. So I analyzed all my dreams in a Jungian way, as if the tree were part of me. And it's only now, in retrospect, I look back and think that that was the beginning of this journey. Then later, I was practicing Vajrayana Buddhism and meditating with a Lama, and he advised us to follow the juice. And what he meant by follow the juice was what really sings to our souls, our hearts, the thing we really wanted to do. Well, his advice coincided with my youngest child going off to college and um, finding myself with a little free time. And so I started playing a game with myself. I'd wake up in the morning and say, what do I want to do today? And it was always go to the forest. So I couldn't find people to go with me. So I ended up on this odyssey. I think I'm in my 17th year now, but ended up in this odyssey where 2 or 3 times a week I'd go hike and meditate with the old trees alone. Because sometimes my husband would go, my daughter, or my best friend. But a lot of times I couldn't find anyone to go. And so I discovered there's something wonderful and magical about being alone in nature. No one's watching you, and all that noise of response to other people, just to their energetic field, was gone. And so I really experienced my core essence, and it became clearer and cleaner and then more available to deeply listen to the intelligence and consciousness of nature.
Oh, I have goosebumps when you tell this. Thank you so much. I feel it. We've talked about that briefly before, like the way you just described coming back home to yourself, and felt like really the trees were calling you to come back to yourself to learn about their wisdom. And I feel that is something that is maybe even more deeply needed now than it was 100 years ago when we have been naturally more in nature, and now it's something we consciously choose to. Like you said, you didn't get anyone to always go with you, so you did go alone, and that might be just been the greatest gift because of everything that happens. And I'm curious, like, because you said that when you are alone in nature, you like kind of realize that there's no other energy field of another human soul around you. I feel like that is something, especially in the city, or even if you live with people in your apartment, it's just so rare to like really expand all the way out that we can expand in our field and to really have that feeling. So I think that's just such a beautiful gift to experience and to work with it. And I imagine you get a lot of clarity out of what you're here for when you do that.
Well, especially for all of the intuitives and empaths that are probably a lot of the people listening to your show, a lot of sensitive people, we're always picking up a lot and responding. And it's not necessarily clear or clean. I mean, before this odyssey with the forest and being in wilderness so much, I would have emotions come through me and I wouldn't even realize they weren't mine. And I know that's a common experience that a lot of, but now I can distinguish that much more easily because I got to feel my own energy. It wasn't really my own energy. We're never really just in our field because this is a world, a planet of relations. Everything is interrelated, intricately so. But instead of humans, I was running into the river otters, and I ran into mountain lions and bears and rutting elk and herons and the trees and the blooming skunk cabbage and the trilliums. And so those are softer relationships in the sense that, well, for one thing, they're not verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And they come in more sensually than intellectually. So a lot of it was very heart opening. But nature's really intelligent, and I find we humans, at least in Western cultures that have lost our indigenous roots,
Mm-hmm.
tend to be pretty self-centered. And because we're so caught up in our intellects and our heads, and we're very inventive, we think we're the only ones that are conscious. And we're not. And in
No,
fact, my
definitely.
latest inquiry is that
Yeah.
maybe they're more conscious, and I mean the trees, I mean the plants, I mean the
Yeah.
birds, of me than I am of them walking out
Mm.
there. And so it's been humbling to get outside of that, of myself, and being so confined in my human perspective.
Mm. I love that very much, and I agree. Like the more we go out and like consciously connect back to nature, the more we realize that like it's not all about us, and that we are not like the center of Earth, but we are just part of it, and there is so much wisdom to discover, so much like communication beyond the logical realm that we most have been programmed to operate in, but that is something that is like calling the soul, opening the heart, that you essentially experience, and that all is communication too. But we kind of tend to believe, I feel like, or the most people I have been with in my life or working with, it's so much about logic, about like the mechanical clicking of the thoughts, and often not enough, I would say, about like, how do I feel with this? What is my body moving? Is I like, the like relaxing backwards? Is there like this going of tension that is like naturally provided when we are in nature? Our bodies can let go, and really, like, if there's no dangerous situation, but like we were talking, safe walking within the forest or something like this, there is so much on the subconscious level that I feel we totally miss. We've talked about that before, like this real nature versus the illusion through all the tools we now have, through virtual reality tools, or even like a lot of like spiritual tools that people use, like sound bowls you've mentioned before, or things like that can ground us, but they ground us in a different way than nature does.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think when we were talking before, I said this line I wrote. I don't remember much of what I write, but this one line I wrote was the full sensual immersion, which is the glory of nature's art. And ecosystems are not, intact ecosystems are not fragmented. Everything goes together in this beautiful way, the colors, the sounds, um, the smells, and it makes one whole. And I think being in places where that intact, wild wholeness has never been tampered with invites us into the part of ourselves that still knows wholeness.
Mm.
And we all have this. We have it in our DNA. We have it in our uh, ancestral streams of awareness. We still have the part of us that knows wholeness. Our bodies are so much part of nature, so intelligent, and they're always seeking homeostasis. They're always seeking balance. And our bodies usually pull it off. They know how. Even now, even with kind of we're all exposed to a lot of things that are distressing, whether it's toxics or the news or,
Hmm.
chemicals in our food. So, and even so, it's amazing how resilient our bodies that have evolved over eons are at dealing with this.
Yes, I
And
totally.
so when we go to nature, we're reminded, and our bodies are reminded.
Mhm. That is really beautiful. I love that. And I think it gives so much power back to ourselves because, like, there is, you've touched on it, there's like so much EMFs or toxic in food or whatever. We've talked about like how much we are on screens today or high the stress levels are. And all of that, like, generally, like, it's not healthy if you want to label it. But our bodies are like so wise and so resilient and so capable to adapt to a lot of situations, much more than I think we give them credit for. And one of my first mentors, an energy worker that I like dearly love, she said basically the same thing, but like related to energy work that you just said, which is like the body can adapt, and sometimes it needs just the reminder of how to, or the option to do so by us, like taking a certain action, like going out into nature, or like in my example, like really taking on the energy work and like being conscious about the energy flow in the body. And then like it does its own thing. So you don't need to
Mhm.
do so much. When you go, you go. You go out in nature. You like meditate or you sit in the sun, but the rest is kind of the body's wisdom. And I think that's really beautiful because often in the society I live in, and I bet you in California too, it's like this. We kind of think we need to do a certain thing to make our body do a certain thing, but actually, it knows much better than our logic does. So it's more kind of the letting it do its thing than really
Mhm.
participating. Like,
Mhm. Yeah. And I honestly, one of the things that I think is as we begin to tend and restore wild places, even whatever small ways we can, it could be a house plant or a pet or a window box. But as we expand our relationship with the green growing world and the non-human intelligences, we'll be restoring ourselves at the same time. This goes together. A lot of our modern, I mean, I know we live longer than, the Middle Ages, the ancestors, although biblically they always talk about people living 200 years, and who knows if that's literal. But so I know when we had bubonic plagues and things, our lifespans were pretty short, and we've had a lot of good technological leaps. And I love science, and I'm not invalidating any of that. But I think at this point, we've gotten so far away from seeing the sky and watching the birds and just feeling the seasons and knowing the phases of the moon and being in relationship that it's a real stress on people. And stress is proven in every way to be bad for our health. So restoring that connection and relationship as much as we can. Yeah, and a lot of countries and places are now planting trees and encouraging gardens, community gardens, and making more common space. And that's also going to restore us. Our human minds have something called soft fascination, and nature entices us into soft fascination, which is when things are curvy and fractal and intricate, and there's patterns, and
mhm.
it stimulates our creativity and our imagination and our sense of awe and wonder in a way that constantly being in rectangles and boxes, looking at screens just doesn't.
I agree. Yeah, in nature, nothing is like really rectangle if you if you look at it. But we kind of tend to live in all these boxes and look into boxes and have boxes in our hands. So it's actually quite amazing how far we've I don't want to say grown out of that, but it's kind of I feel like the pendulum is has swung really high and to this one side, but now we're like slowly swinging back. We have that too in Europe, that there's like more community gardens. There's nature is like kind of coming back into our lives in very different forms, and it's quite subtle still, but it's coming back on more and more, and people kind of like remember the connection and the curiosity and fascination and this like this calling that maybe you have felt when you started doing your walks. I feel it's slowly collectively remembered, and that's a beautiful thing. To like go back into collectively a way where we live more in tune with nature. Now I feel it's like, especially in the city, it's like we close it off, and the city kind of feels like a machine. And outside of that, there's nature. But inside of that machine, it's like kind of we try to like push nature as far away as we can, because it's not as, you know, it's not a box, and also it's like not so predictable. But I feel we are definitely able, with everything we have in our hands now and all the like intelligence and interconnectedness, that we can go back to living more in tune with nature again, and really like coming back to us. I believe that there is definitely a way to do so, and yeah, we hope it's kind of going back into that direction. I would so love to see that.
Well, it's so interesting because on planet Earth, on, our Earth Mother, nothing's not nature, including our
Mm,
rectangular buildings that don't let us feel the fresh air. So,
mm,
so we are an expression of Earth. We are nature. We're Earth. We're made of her. But for some crazy reason, we've done this schism where we try and pretend we're something else. And so it's just put an artificial layer of separation between us. And I think as we have this big wake up call collectively of climate change, if we want to survive as a species and keep many other species alive and thriving, we're going to have to come back to basic biomimicry, but we're going to have to employ the concepts that are everywhere in nature, where everything's recycled and morphs one thing into another. And it's not a detached system. Everything becomes everything else,
mm,
literally.
yeah.
And we're made of that too. And we will also do that. We only can slow it down. Yes, we can embalm bodies and put them in concrete and get them as far away from being composted by worms as possible. But eventually, the concrete's even going to dissolve. We're not going to stay separate from this process. And uh, so we can pay attention and listen and observe, as is happening more and more, and watch how nature does these things and design our own gardens and farms
Mm.
and lifestyles to be in harmony with her basic laws.
Oh,
Because the
yes.
laws of nature are real.
Yeah.
Gravity is gravity, right? It works every time.
It really does. I love like the analogy of like really learning from nature in so many ways, even from the littlest houseplant you have. Because like when I think of permaculture, yes, it's beautiful to know like which herb to grow next to which herb, but you can like translate that so much to your own life and how you live in your relationship. So there's a lot of like wisdom that we can get out of nature when we, I feel like when we take the time to really observe. I'm really reminded of my grandfather while we're talking, because he loved observing the birds, and he loved just sitting in his garden and like just watching it. As a kid, I didn't really get it. Now I totally get it. I'm really reminded of him right now, um, with all like the wisdom that comes from just seeing how things work, and then like applying it to your own life in however you feel called to. I think there's a deep knowledge in there that is like really ready at our fingertips to like us to harvest it if we are open enough to just go and look and take it in.
Right. And we have so many wise poets and writers, Lao Tzu, Wendell Berry, Mary Oliver, all these people that have paid attention and observed nature and then translated that wisdom into profound teachings that do improve the quality of our lives.
Oh yes, they do. They do. I think it was Lao Tzu when I was in my later teenager years. I was like really not well, and my father said something of Lao Tzu to me, where it's like the similarity is like kind of the bamboo is like, it's like in the wind, it's kind of like going back and forth, but it's never breaking. And for me, that was such a soothing expression to hear, because I felt like I was breaking, and I thought like, no, I'm not. I'm just like, I'm just like being torn here and there. And that has like really, I thought about that for years, and it's still in there.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought him up, because there's so much wisdom in just observing and then putting like the right words kind of together, the right energetic frequencies into this, into kind of translating what we see from nature, from our relationships, into a wisdom that can travel beyond this observation, beyond relationships or even generations, and really nourish so many people and inspire so many people just out of this one maybe observation that took a minute or what for him, that whatever 1,000 years ago. So it's really, I think it's really interesting how long these things can like support people and people's souls and souls over generations and generations.
Yeah. And then our putting the mystery and the wonder and the awe and the magic and the beauty back into our lives, which in the Industrial Revolution we became pretty mechanized and increasingly reified. We became cogs in a machine. Even our school systems reflect that. And so we're hungry. We're really hungry to have that magic, which is, of course, everywhere because it's unimaginable. This cosmos, just looking up at the stars is mind blowing. So it is everywhere. But opening our hearts and our beings back up to just what an amazing miracle it is to be alive on this planet.
Yes. Yes, it is. I feel we like the hustle and grind culture that is currently still very promoted makes us forget that so easily. But like you say, if you look at Up to the Stars, it's like nearly full moon. We were recording this. I was like gazing at it before we met. This is just beyond imagination what is up there. And that's just the one thing. We talked about like the communication of trees before, or even like the way we interact with nature, the way we interact with our pets. It's all magic if you decide to look at it that way. And there's so much wisdom we can gain out of that, or so much like energy we can get out of that, so much knowledge for our day-to-day lives if we wish to. Or we can also choose to like not see it as magic and just take it for granted. But it depends on like our maybe openness or consciousness.
Right. And when we do open ourselves just to beauty, we could just start there, just to the beauty. When we do that, we open ourselves to a lot of joy and a lot of aliveness. And as our aliveness goes up, then what we collectively co-create here on the planet will be more joyful. It'll be happier. Because, in a lot of ways we've been making ourselves miserable and we don't have to. We have a lot of stuff to show for it, but
Hmm.
but the real human needs, and some of our human needs involve expression. All of nature is just this incredible creative expression.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable that we could have zebras and giraffes and polka dotted pufferfish and the whole panoply of amazement. So
Hmm.
we humans have always wanted to give our own creative expression back. We want to sing and dance and howl at the moon and create music and art and beauty and delicious food. And in a way, those are our living prayers back
Mm.
to
Good point.
the creator. We're part of the creation, but we're also wanting to add our own gifts.
Yes. Yes, and by doing so, I feel there's so much content we can get out of that. Whatever tool or expression we use, if it's dancing or art or like I love doing flower mandalas on the ground. And yes, of course I destroy them afterwards, or nature destroys them, but it's just so beautiful part without any like logical sense, or there's nothing that I can get out of them rather than the beauty and like this act of creation, but the fulfillment that
Yeah.
comes, that is like really magical, like you say. And I feel the more we kind of allow ourselves to do all the things that are making us happy and helping us to like express our own essence, this is like enriching the world in general, if someone sees it or not, because it changes the way we show up, it changes our frequency, it changes like the whole energy
Right,
around it. So
right.
it's more profound than it might look like in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, we're all part of the collective vibration, the collective symphony. And when you're adding in a beautiful note, that has an influence. I think that for sure. And that's why it's always such a challenging balance when there's real wrongs being done and injustices, and to not lose sight of what we really want, of the beauty of what we wish, because we can get tangled up, especially right now with everything going on in the US. It's pretty easy to get tangled up in resisting and fighting against, which has its place. It's important, but we don't want to lose our visions. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the type of thoughts that I have out meditating with the trees or by a river or on a mountain peak are just different than the ones I get in my house. And Osprey Oriole Lake wrote an incredibly profound book called The Story is in Our Bones, about her work with WeCan. And she's very active with Indigenous people for protecting the climate. But she said that towns used to, Ireland, especially in Europe, when people would have a council, they would sit outside with a council tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the kind of thoughts that we have when we're in physical proximity, in that level of relationship, are just different. And it's
Mm-hmm.
something that your listeners and you may want to play with and notice. When I'm sitting by a tree in a park, what are my thoughts now? Just be aware, see if they're different, because I certainly have noticed that for me they are. So I'd be very curious to hear if this is just personal or more universal.
Oh, me too. Me too. I can like answer for myself. It's definitely very different. And I've always drawn on nature in moments where I felt very desperate or kind of like, kind of nervous or whatever, to like really connect with different energies and with like the timelessness of nature. For me, it was always very calming to, or is still, to go to to a river and to see like, whatever is like emotionally bringing me up right now. The river is flowing and flowing and flowing, and it can take with it whatever I want to release. And also like, what has this river seen? How many sad or joyful people have sat there? It kind of like, it has always like given me the ability to look from a higher perspective rather than
Yeah.
staying caught up in my own stuff. So I think that is definitely something. But also, I love what you said about doing that in groups, and especially for the ones who kind of like have more power in this world we live in to decide how others are going to live, like in like imagining government decision makers doing their work in the forest. I feel the outcomes would be
Right?
quite different.
Because
So
then we have the voice of
that would be
nature
so amazing.
welcomed in.
Yeah.
I mean, nature communicates to us more through um, through vibration and frequency, through the way our nervous systems relax, through our biochemistry, through our sense of smell, through all these different channels. But nature is communicating with us more strongly when we're immersed.
Yeah.
And so their decisions might be different. There would be, at least the voice of nature would be there. So it was a change. Um, During the, when a lot of the more indigenous religions were taken over, there was a change of bringing people inside for meetings, for church, for different events. And we probably have lost the voice of nature to a degree in our councils, and we need nature back because she's wise. And I have a book that just came out for children. It's 8 to 12-year-old. It's a true story called The Miracle Forest. And I'm bringing it up now to share um, this community in Colombia that was sustainable, couldn't get anything to grow on the savannah. They're just grasslands.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, they put their best foot forward or feet forward, and they tried tropical Caribbean pine trees. Well, shaded in the understory of these pines, rainforest not seen in the area, some biologists think for 30,000 years, spontaneously came back and regenerated, bringing over 260 different species of flora and fauna back. And now they're expanding and doing more and more of these. The founder of the community, Paolo Lugari, says that it could be replicated anywhere in the tropics, that these forests, and they're hard to bring back because once the topsoil is lost, it's very hard to restore a rainforest. So my extrapolated theory from this is I think as we humans do our best to work with nature and do a little restoration, the ability of the earth intelligence to respond in hugely restorative, miraculous ways that we can't even imagine is there.
Oh, agreed.
And so this hopeless situation, oh, we're doomed, blah, blah, blah. The ice caps are melting. This is happening. It's probably not.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't in charge of solving it. We just need to work with the intelligence of nature and not constantly oppose it
Oh,
and, continue our violations and greedy extractions because it's not serving us either.
yeah. No, no, it definitely is not. And I love what you shared because this is no excuse to like go on as we are. But it's like a wonderful like kind of glimmer of hope to say like nature is giving the credibility or like giving nature back the power of resilience and of wisdom to say like she will grow back in ways that we can't ever imagine. And this like, oh, it's not possible. It's just like I think for nature everything is possible. It's just like not to for us to grasp it. But I love that there is like, that it's kind of making an openness to like the humans creating more space for nature and try to work less against her, and then she'll take like care of the rest and kind of works her wisdom into
Yeah.
what it's really beautiful. It's kind of what we said for the body before. The moment we kind of give the body the space to calm down and to take in what it wants and needs to take in from nature, it does without us consciously knowing. And I think the same thing is happening on the larger scale as well. It's kind of just beyond our imagination. And that's why this is nothing that kind of like gives more people hope. until now because
Yeah.
I feel
And
it would be
each
so
little
good.
thing counts. All of
Yeah.
our little individual actions, and we don't have to like kill ourselves trying to be quote unquote good people and do it all perfectly. We could just drop into our hearts, I
Hmm.
think, and let ourselves be guided to our personal right next step, because we're fitting into a whole enormous um, tapestry of life. And so we're only one little piece. We don't have to do it all. And I know I get overwhelmed because it feels urgent and there's crises, and then all I do is I burn out, and then I'm another person in need of healing, which I certainly was when I romped off to the woods. And the woods did heal me. I had been suffering for like 15 years with pretty bad fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, could never sleep, and I didn't expect to be healed. I had by that point in time tried everything. Everything. You know how people are when they have a chronic illness. We go through the gamut, but it worked. I was so shocked that that's what actually was the bulk of my healing. 80%. I mean, I did other things. I
Yeah.
juiced. That helped a lot.
Yes.
But just actually coming home to myself
Yeah.
and allowing myself to be. And it was, the healing has been deep and profound and has given me more ground to be myself.
Hmm.
Because, as children in these cultures that most of us are raised in the West anyway, uh, we get sort of talked out of ourselves at a pretty
Oh,
young age.
yes. Yes, we are.
Our
I think.
schools are set up on the concept of delayed gratification. So we learn to do something we don't want to do now and we're not interested in and maybe bored to death, because then we're going to get this reward
Mhm.
later. But all children want to learn. It's innate. It's how we're built. And so we should be learning what we're interested in, and that should be on the menu.
Oh yes, I totally agree. That's a big theme for me right now because my son just needed to go into school. Um, but it's like really, I feel it's like quite an, even though the school is amazing, but like the essential experience of school is just not what we're made for. I agree. I would love to like just see him out in nature doing his thing. Um,
Right, with guides, people that could teach him things. But
of
yeah,
course, but like
I
it's
know.
more of a intuitive learning rather than a logical learning, and all this. I'm talking a lot about this deconditioning that my generation is doing right now, or people like in my bubble are doing so much deconditioning and like trying to come back home to themselves and remembering who they actually are, when every, or at least some of the like layers have been stripped away of how we should be or how what we should do. And I feel like if the next
Mhm.
generation doesn't isn't that hardly imprinted on what is normal, how much more beautiful would our would our whole collective be? And also coming back to nature, how much more peaceful would we like coexist with and in nature? Because I truly feel that's how my parents have raised me, like the more peaceful we are in ourselves and the more like immersed we are in nature and like really living in tune with it rather than against it, the less there is pollution, the less there is toxic living, the less war there is. So everything's kind of falling into place the moment you tune in with yourself. And that
Yeah.
sounds like really cheesy, but I think it's still very, very true that you don't harm anyone else consciously if you are like really in tune with yourself. And so from there, everything ripples out, and we could live a whole different life collectively as individually the more we would in tune with ourselves.
You know, uh, there's some research out that our bodies actually pick up something like, I think it's 11,000 bits of information per, compared to our minds are picking up 11. It's something, I might not have the numbers exactly right, but the ratio's
They are
right.
profound
That
enough.
kind of a ratio. So our bodies, I mean, people who feel like they don't have a connection with nature that is easily accessible, which is so true for so many people living in big cities right now. Everyone has a body. If you're here alive on the planet, you have a body. And so that's a first place to tune into and pay attention to how we feel after we eat or drink this or that, after we,
Yeah.
what hours feel good to sleep, because it does make a difference which hours we're sleeping at night, and different people thrive with different hours. And so really getting in touch um, with just what works for us, with our cycles, our rhythms, our relationship with our own body is such a good starting point.
Yes, it is. And I think it's
Hmm.
also very, maybe not an easy one, but it's a simple way to start doing small things, and then from there on you can like grow into connecting more and connecting deeper. But as you said, like we've talked about that before briefly, it's like a habit of escaping the body in whatever many ways we have for this. Like really coming back to the body can be really profound and a wonderful start on this journey back to ourselves, and also like to a collective health, let's call it. So I think it's really,
Hmm.
it's a beautiful, manageable start that is not overwhelming you, because you can like start with like the smallest, tiniest thing, and from there seeing what your body biofeedback, they call it so wonderfully, but seeing how your body responds to it. And
Yeah.
it's nothing complicated, actually. It's like a very simple process. I think that's a wonderful way to start connecting more and to start also slowing down. So um mm,
Slowing down. I mean, we've we have a frantic pace and it's exhausting. And then we burn out. And the people that manage the frantic pace the best climb up to a lot of the highly professional, really good jobs, but a lot of them are
right.
get real burned out. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. But I just wanted to add something we were talking about before this was recorded, was that even listening to a recording of bird song is proven to lower stress hormones like cortisol and improve mood. So there's a lot of things people who are living in a city can do. Get a
Yeah.
good water filter, drink really pure water, put in some flowers and house plants, and play some bird song or water sounds, and um because it does bring, I heard this, I think she was one of the 13 indigenous grandmothers, maybe it was grandmother Flora de Mayo, but she said that if you have no access to nature, it helps to even watch it on the Discovery Channel, and that will put more of the vibration in people's fields. And when we have more of the vibration in the field, we will either go to those realities or start creating them where we are. So however we can welcome in more of that beauty that really is our birthright. We're on a planet that has evolved over eons to create this biosphere of unfathomable beauty and intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, and also it kind of reminds me of being like a woman. You cook or anybody that likes to cook, you cook a really delicious meal. You want somebody to come eat it. So I think like the intelligence behind this creation wants our appreciation. That is sacred.
Mm, that is really beautiful. Oh, I get goosebumps when you said that. Yes, yes, it's really beautiful, and I think it's there's no excuse for, or there's actually no way not to be able to connect to nature, even if it is through a screen or through a recording. So there's always the opportunity to do so, and I think we all benefit a lot from like welcoming that in more and allowing it in more, and then like you said, universal laws will like kind of attract more of that into our lives as well. So maybe we then move out into the countryside, or maybe whatever happens, so that more of this frequency of nature can come in whatever ways. It's like there are so many ways, and we don't know which is the one that is coming, but it is coming slowly if we are like opening the door. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things to do to start slowing down, and I think to like release the overwhelm and really learn to invite the wisdom of nature, which so many of us are craving more and more and more. And
Hmm.
oh, thank you so much. There are so many things I would love to ask you, but I feel for one episode it's like it's like just too much. So I feel
It's a
like
fun conversation.
yeah,
Well, we
uh,
want our wild and free spirits
yeah,
back.
yes,
You know,
yes, I
we do.
agree. We do,
We
we do.
want, and they're just right under the surface.
Hmm.
One little heartbeat away. It's a matter of tuning in. And we all can do that. And there's a lot of solace to be found, and peace and calm. And then that will give us the strength that we need to, and the awareness that we need to know what our personal next step is, because we're not all the same and we're not supposed to all be doing the same things.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. We could be like nature. There's so many different ways we can express ourselves if we find the
Exactly.
resonating with us at that moment, and it might change. So, yeah, I feel
Well,
getting
it's
into
like the river.
self is really it's really where everything can start to like grow out of, which is just such a beautiful picture. Mm. I think.
Right? We can blossom into ourselves.
Oh yes, I love that. I need to write that down. That's just so beautiful.
And here's my little disclaimer at the bottom. You might discover you're 70 when it starts happening. I mean, it took me forever, my whole life. I mean, y- right? So you never know in this journey of life.
Yes, which is the beauty in
It's
itself,
all a discovery.
that we don't know
Yeah.
what happens, but it's always like unfolding perfectly the moment it should. Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm really so inspired and feeling so good right now. I thank you so much for your wisdom. And my son is turning 8 very soon, so you said your newest book for children is about that age. I will look that up and let me know
Yeah,
what
he
I
might like it.
yes, where people can find you so that I can put that within the show notes. Where do people find your book, or how do you love like people to connect with
Well, I have a website, www, just my name, ellenddavidson.com, lowercase. And I have a couple books available through 12 Willows Press and anywhere online or ordered through bookstores. And a new one called Sacred Forest Bathing is coming out in May with Inner Tradition. So, and that's really about my experiences, not just mine, but also just the whole. That's where I did a lot of the nature writing
you?
and that I've done. But thank you for that. And
Yes.
I can text or email you those if you want.
Yeah, thank you. I will put them in the show notes below, and then people can connect and learn more and really connect with. I feel it's like the calling. If that comes up, then it's about the connection with themselves. So I think that's really beautiful. It was so lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too, Anna. This was fun.